Hello everyone and welcome back to Hiking in History. Today we're not actually going to be doing a hiking in history video. This is going to be something a bit different, start of a new video series I guess, that I'm going to be calling Graveyard Stories, as I am in a graveyard, as you can see. So the idea is about telling forgotten history I guess, and there are not many better places to tell forgotten histories than graveyards, because you know, every one of these people that have been buried in graveyards all over the world, not just this one, you know, have stories to tell, have had a life that they've led. So it's about essentially, you know, telling some of these people's stories. So that's what this series is going to be about, because we always have to remember that, you know, all these people that came before us these are the people that made us who we are today. And today the grave in question is this one here. So I'm in Longton Cemetery, so it's really local for me, it's my hometown, and it's this here, this rather big monument, and this is from the Mossfield Colliery disaster, so on October 16th 1889, so a bit over 100 years ago now. A disastrous explosion happened at Mossfield Colliery, which was in Longton as well. It killed 64 miners and 16 horses. The cause was never conclusively proved of the explosion, but most people believe that it was to be the fault of a gob fire in a worked out area of the mine. And so a gob fire was, I didn't know what it was initially. The gob is a part of a mine where the coal's already been removed. The space is then filled with waste, essentially. So fires could sometimes, you know, just spontaneously occur in these gobs from when waste, you know, heated up, and there was a lot of trouble with that, and that is what is suspected to happen at the Mossfield Colliery. So many of the men were buried here in Longton Cemetery. You can actually see they have all the names on them, so this side, all this side, and then all of this side as well, were all buried here. And then there's a section at the back where these people were buried elsewhere, and then there were a few that were not recovered. But when they were buried, so, you know, 1889, there was it was a huge event here. Very long day of, you know, grief and sorrow, obviously. Flags around Longton and Stoke-on-Trent itself were flown at half-mast, and thousands of people actually came from around the country. You know, it was a big news story. Thousands of people came to Stoke and to Longton, especially around the neighbourhoods of Adderley Green, Ashwood, Sandford Hill. They were especially busy because a lot of the miners came from there, which is extremely close to home to me, because I am literally from those neighbourhoods. That is where I live. But it's such a forgotten piece of history, because literally, apart from about, I think 2 years ago, I discovered that this was actually here and learned about the mining disaster itself just on my own. It was never taught in school or anything, you know, it's not really known. So there were big processions as well that all came through here on the funeral day. As you can imagine, this was for this unveiling of this monument. And I mean, someone remembers as well, which is kind of encouraging to see, because someone has left a flower. So someone clearly remembers, as you can see, in memory of the 64 men and youths who lost their lives at the Mossfield Colliery explosion, October 16th, 1889. Some of it is a little bit worn, but obviously it is old, but for something so old it is in fairly good condition, thankfully. So the mine had 2 shafts. Both of them were coal for raising coal. The mines were 440 yards deep, which I'm not very good with yards, so that's about 402 metres or a quarter of a mile deep. It had 3 coal seams that were worked, and they were worked in 2 shifts. So there was a day shift of 200 men, 200 men and boys, because we have to remember as well that, you know, this is the 1800s, and, you know, you started work early. So, you know, teenagers essentially were down these mines. Day shift started 7 AM to 3:30 PM, and then there was a night shift of 100 men that worked from 9 PM to 5:30 in the morning. And at the time of the explosion, around 1,750 tonnes of coal were being brought up per week, which is a hell of a lot. And obviously that contributed to, you know, the vast wealth that Britain had at that time. The mine had already previously dealt with gobfires before. They weren't like a super rare occurrence. So when one did break out, it was a serious thing, but, you know, they had dealt with them before. So many parts of the workings have been sealed off already because of that, because of gobfires in the past. And signs of a gobfire were actually reported at the time, 2 days before the explosion. Workers smelt a distinctive smell of the waste heating off. Stoppings were ordered by the higher ups to be made nearest where they thought the fire was. In the inquest that followed after the explosion, it was deemed that there were, you know, improper measures taking place, especially about the stoppings as well. That was considered a very big mistake, and it was reported as well that there were serious errors in the supervision of the colliery itself. So at the time of the explosion, there was only one fireman on duty as well, and he had 2 seams to look after. So, you know, overworked, you know, to put it mildly, because he was also busy trying to deal with the gobfire. So it was thought to be a build-up of gas, and then bad ventilation meant that the explosion was kind of inevitable. And it happened at 3:50 AM, so 10 to 4 in the morning it happened. Rescue work began immediately, with assistance from other nearby collieries came to help out with the rescue. Worked around the clock, clearing all the damage and trying to recover bodies and everything. Certain areas could only be partially explored because clearing the area and letting air into it could have spelled more disaster with the fire still going on. So they had to be extremely careful as well. At the time of the explosion, there were 77 men down in the mines, so only 64 survived, along with 16 horses died. And eventually it took over 3 months for them to fully clear out all the mess and get down into the mine. And 5 of the men were never found, which you can see on the men that were never recovered. The youngest victim was a boy called George Steele. You can see him here as well. There he is, George Steele. He was only 14, and he was the youngest victim. You just got to think as well, you know, how crazy it is by today's standards, that a 14-year-old was working down in a mine at 4 in the morning in 1889, you know, which kind of, it can seem like long ago, but it really actually isn't. You know, how many generations is that? You know, you have a couple of people that live into the 90s, you know, they were around back then. It's kind of insane. And while George Steele was the youngest, most of them, if you look at the list of the people and their ages, most of them were under 30. You know, there's some 60-year-old men. It's about the highest age, 65, I think. But you'll find that most of them were very young. You know, quite a few teenagers, and then a lot in their 20s and early 30s, but most were under 30. So the result of the inquiry that happened as well afterwards was eventually the manager, which was a man called Mr. Potts, they found him not guilty of culpable negligence, which I find hard to say, culpable negligence, but they found him not guilty of it, in not withdrawing the men from the fires when they were reported, you know, which may seem kind of extremely unfair, but I suppose they'd fought gobfires before, so it wasn't especially thought that you had to evacuate just because you thought there was one down there. However, the inquiry severely censured him, which a censure is like a formal statement of disapproval, essentially. But that public formal expression of disapproval was basically for him not inspecting the mine himself when they were reported, which he should have done as the manager. But this led to him resigning. And that is the story of the Mossfield Colliery disaster. A very sad one, but a very important one, especially for local history around Longton and Stoke-on-Trent. You know, I find it sad that it's so forgotten. You know, because these men are what built this country, essentially. You know, these are the people that gave their lives and built the prosperity that we all enjoy today. And it just sort of gets me thinking about men in general, because it's quite unfashionable to be a man in today's world. Yeah, I believe that, you know, that some more gratitude is needed, really, especially from today's generations, for these men and the other men, and men that are working today that are doing these ridiculous jobs, ridiculously dangerous jobs, that keep everything working, you know, down in the sewers and on power lines, risking their lives on oil rigs and God knows what, you know, doing insane manual labour all over the world. I'm not just talking about the UK. And they're put down a lot of the time and not given the respect that they deserve. So this video is in memory of these people, these men and boys that actually built this country. So I feel like these should be remembered, and that's why I've made this video, and why I've started this series, really, because it's going to be a lot about forgotten people that probably deserve to be remembered, for good or bad. But these guys buried here definitely for good. You know, what would we have done without men like this, essentially, and men like this today? So yeah, I'm actually going to go to the site now. There's not anything really left there at where Mossfield Colliery was, but I'll go and show you where it is. There's a little sort of monument there. So yeah, let's go. So this is where the Mossfield Colliery disaster happened, just up here. There's a monument that's been laid here, but other than this, there is no evidence that anything happened here. So there used to be a huge slag heap of all the waste. I'll find pictures to put up of it. But now it's just a place, quite a barren looking place at the moment, but it's just a place for dog walkers and a little sort of nature reserve. Here they are, the old wheels. It now is just the monument to the disaster. There isn't any information board. There's one sort of down there, and then there's this here. Yeah, because it's kind of crazy to think that the 5 men that weren't never found are obviously still underneath this ground somewhere. I always think it's important to actually come to the places as well, to sort of breathe in the same air, even if there's not anything left of the colliery or whatever it is you're looking for itself. I always get some sort of feeling. It's usually a pretty sad feeling, nostalgic feeling, whatever, even if it's not something that I've experienced personally. But to come to the place where it actually happened, I'd always recommend doing that. Whatever historical thing you're interested in, try and go to it, even if there's nothing, there's no evidence of the event happening, if it's just a field where a battle happened, because when you're there you get something out of it, you get more of a connection to the event itself, just knowing that where you are standing is where it happened. And right where I'm standing now is where the colliery explosion, the disaster happened. 64 men died. So that's going to be it for today's video, part of the new series of graveyard stories, which I don't know when I'll do another one, but I thought it'd be an interesting, cool story and cool new series to do that's part of hiking in history but not specifically a hiking in history video. So the next video, I actually think I know what it's going to be. It's going to be a proper hiking in history video, similar to the first one I did, going to Throwley Old Hall. Going to be hiking to there. It's like an old Tudor mansion that's in ruins. I've never been before, going to hike there though and check that out, so that'll be the next one, pretty soon hopefully, next couple of weeks possibly, but we'll see, no promises. But yeah, that's it for today. Like, subscribe, all the YouTube stuffs, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.